Good afternoon. Oh, East gave me a better welcome than that. Nobody told a lot I haven't done this at East, but that was really good. So just to give you some background of why the heck I'm even here, how many of you know, or who can tell me what forensics, when you hear forensics, not the drama stuff, but forensics, what does that usually mean?
Like crime scene.
CSI.
Yeah, so crime scenes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm handing out, and unfortunately I probably don't have enough for everybody, but I have other goodies too, are something that I'm sure you think most adults do not have, but we do. But it's kind of the whole reason why I talk to high school students, because they're little brains. They're actually erasers. But my whole point kind of being here is to get you to just hear what I'm saying. As adults, just yesterday I was in high school too. And so I know that you're going to try stuff. I know that your friends are going to try stuff. And I'm not deluded to think that you're just going to say no to everything. So my point of being here is just to help you understand what is out there. And because I work in forensics, I work with cops a lot. And I work with, does anybody know who does like a lot of the death investigations? Does anybody know who that is? Yes, a medical examiner. So I work a lot with unexplained death. So I see a lot of the bad stuff. A lot of the bad stuff. So while you may hear from your friends that it's okay and then whatever else, I know the real truth. I see it every day in my job. I see the coroner and the medical examiner reports. And what's so important for you guys, because you're at the age that you are, your brain's still working on all those connections and developing itself. And what's important for you is life stinks enough as it is. You don't need to give yourself, a worse time of it. I want to make sure that you let yourself, get your brain to where it needs to be. And most of these drugs are going to mess up with a lot of those connections and pathways and stuff. So I just want to come here and tell you about the drugs. Again, we're not deluded to think that you're never going to try them or that somebody else isn't going to have them or try them. But it's important for you to understand what they are, what they can do to you, and what we're seeing in people at your age. So when we talk about designer drugs, does anybody know what that even means?
The expensive things?
Yes, not the expensive things. It's synthetic in nature. So what does that mean? Does anybody know what synthetic means?
Fake.
And plastic.
Yes, too many answers, so I can't give out goodies. But yeah, they're things that are created. They're not natural. Like, the fern growing in your backyard, that's natural, right? Something that's synthetic is something that's created somewhere else. So that's the type of drugs that we're talking about today, for the most part. There are a few others that I'll talk about too, but for the most part, we're going to talk about the synthetics. So, do you think legal equals safe? So if somebody says a drug is legal, do you think that's safe? Perfect. You're the first school that I've had actually answer it that way. So the biggest thing I want you to get across today is there's a lot of drugs out there that you'll hear about in the news, and they're going to say that they're legal. But we found, especially with Spicer K2, that is not the case. They are not safe, especially when it comes to people that are your age. So how many of y'all took a survey, right? Do you remember taking it?
Yes.
What kind of survey?
I know at least like 80 of you did. So there was a survey that was done, I think, earlier this week, right? There was a survey. Let's agree on that. So there was a survey that happened, y'all were asked, have you ever used Spicer K2? Do you know somebody that has? All those other questions. And your numbers are the same. Your numbers are the same as just about, I do a lot of this in Illinois, for high schools in Illinois, and your numbers are just about the same, if not a little bit higher than theirs. So it's interesting that it happened to any schools yet in Wisconsin, because we seem to have just as much as an issue as they do. So how many of you have seen some of these products at gas stations, at head shops? What have you seen? K2? This is gonna be dicey, okay? I have really bad aim. Are you ready? Yes. Oh, see, it was a bad catch. It was a good throw. It was a good Just kidding. So this is what the products look like. They're going to come in various packaging, but they're all going to be like this leafy substance. So does anybody know anybody, or you don't have to admit it here if you want to keep it as your friend. Does anybody know anybody that's used Spicer K2? What do they say about it? That it really messed them up.
Didn't taste or like meat or anything like that. It was
Yeah, so a lot of people do this because they think it's the alternative to what? Yeah, but it's not. I will guarantee you it is not. One of the big things that we're finding, especially with people your age, are high incidents of suicide. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of them that have kind of hit close to home, not only like in our region, but I've also talked to their families, and they're kids just like you are. They go to school every day, hopefully you do. So as far as Max is concerned, good kid, 3.8 grade point average, so a good student, goes to school every day. His friends tell him, so we have this spice, or K2, and it's legal, so it's, we've got it, you want to try it? Yes, he does. So goes to his buddy's house, he's 16 years old, he tries it. Immediately, and this is a really common reaction, his heart rate shoots through the roof. So his heart rate gets really fast, and he starts to feel like he's panicking. So unfortunately, he gets in his car, and he calls his mom, and is like, I don't know what's going on, I feel like I'm wigging out, I don't know what's happening, and she says, come home. So as he's trying to get home, it's unclear as to whether or not he meant to drive the way he did, or if it was just a reaction to the drug. But he was driving down a residential street. Does anybody know what the speed limit is when you're driving down like a 25? Wow, yes. So he's supposed to be going 25, right? He exceeds up to 50, loses control, veers off the street, launches the car into a house. And the impact in the house was so great that the engine was released from the engine block in the car and sent several rooms away in the home. And he was killed. This is a result of something that's safe and legal, so just be really careful. And these stories and examples I'm telling you are not just these few 5. This is a representative sample of more than 100. Jacob, from Wisconsin, from Portage area, or Columbus area. Good student, he's a pilot. So before you shout it out if you want a goodie, let me ask you this. If you're a pilot, do you think you can use drugs?
No. No, I said it.
Okay. Do you think anybody pays attention if you're using drugs if you're a pilot?
No, I said it.
I got a lot of brains here. Does anybody know who oversees those pilots? Raise your hand if you know. Who kind of pays attention to them and oversees them and makes sure? CFAA. Oh, sorry, I beat you to it. Sorry, you need to do it. Raise your hand. So, he's a pilot. He has a pilot's license. His dad is a pilot for FedEx. So he travels all over the world with his dad, and then he flies smaller planes. And as holding a license to the FAA, you have to get random drug screens. So, raise your hand. What kind of drugs do you think they're looking for in the drug screen? What do you think? Yeah, weed or pot. So this is an eyeball. Keep your eyes open.
Why did you know?
Because it's what I grabbed. So they look for things like marijuana, methamphetamine. So does anybody think they're actually looking for this synthetic stuff?
No.
Yeah, they're not. So when we know that they're not looking for it, he figures he can use it and not get caught. You've been answering a lot. So Jacob graduates high school and gets into UW Milwaukee, and he's kind of thinking he may become a commercial pilot, maybe military, he's not really sure, but he goes into UWM, gets there, and a bunch of his, friends in college say, hey, there's this drug, and we know that, you're kind of leery about the whole drug testing thing, but why don't you try this one, because they're not going to find it. So he does. This is September of 2011. So this is his freshman year. Starts using it, and all of a sudden his parents, they're monitoring the money in the bank account. They see a huge drop over a month in the bank account. So he comes home at Christmas break, and they talk to him, and he completely breaks down to them and says, I'm addicted to this stuff. I don't know what's going on. I can't get off of it. Goes back for a spring semester, finishes out, comes home for the summer, and tries to detox off of it. So he has withdrawal, he has addiction. Are there any other drugs you can think of that you can get addicted to? Narcotics? Who said meth? Meth? Meth is a big one. Okay, I'll give you an eyeball. So this, although you think it's legal and it's safe, there is addiction potential. So we have to be really careful there. Comes home, detoxes off of it, goes back to school. What do you think happens? He has a relapse, and then he committed suicide. And we're starting to attribute death to, cause and manner of death to these drugs, because it's almost like you abuse the drug and you binge really hard, you stop, and then it's during the crash off the drug that we're seeing a lot of these suicides happen. So Jacob was one of those. Same thing with David Rozga in Iowa, and I'm not going to go into detail about all these. Same thing with a kid out of Minnesota. So again, these are all people your age. They could be sitting right here in this room. It's the same thing. They had a friend that said, go ahead and use it, and it'll be safe. What's in here?
Water.
Yeah. What's your name? Jordan, can I borrow you for a minute? Joel, all right. So, everybody, this is Jordan, if you didn't know.
Hi, Jordan. Hello.
Jordan and I are BFFs. We've been friends. What are you a student? Okay. Are you gonna graduate? Okay. Just checking. So Jordan and I are best friends. So I say to Jordan, "Do you want to have what's in here? What is it? Water. Okay. But we're best friends." And I say, "No, Jordan. It's actually not water. It's something else. But it's gonna make you feel really good. Would you still drink it?" No. We're best friends. Like, you trust me, right? But you don't know what it is, right? So I just want you to get thinking, don't do what Jordan just did. Get you thinking, if your friend's going to offer you something, find out what it is. Why do they want you to take it? Could this be bleach? It could. It could be. Would you drink bleach? Good answer. So, thank you. But that's kind of what I'm getting at is most of the kids that use, all of us, it's because someone else told us it was good, someone else told us it was safe, and that's usually how we get into using these drugs. So just, if you have somebody that comes to you and you're at a party or, wherever it is that you are, and they want you to try something new and you don't know what it is, ask the questions. Find out what it is first and really make that good decision, because we, as experts, we still don't know exactly what's going to happen with these drugs. So if I don't know and I'm supposed to be the expert, you're not going to know either, right? We had some overdose. They were not fatal. Does anybody tell me what fatal means? Yeah. So they weren't a fatal overdose, but they were enough that they ended up at the hospital. So this one is a patient, because it went through the hospital, they call it a patient, we call it a defendant, was smoking spice by the campfire with his family, and all of a sudden he started to have breathing problems. They called 911 because that's what you do when your buddy's not breathing right. And EMS gets there, and he presents with what we call agonal breathing. Does anybody know? If you know what agonal breathing is, raise your hand. What is it?
Is it like where you gasp and like it's not really that you're breathing normally?
Yes. Oh boy, here we go. Watch out. Watch out. Yeah, so this is, agonal breathing is like the last breath before you die. So he was in a really bad way. So EMS shows up, he's turning blue, they're trying to do CPR, all this other stuff. They give him Narcan. Just raise your hand. Does anybody know what Narcan is? What is it?
It's like the stuff that they give you to like counteract heroin.
Yes.
For what?
Heroin. Counteracts heroin. So and this has been a big problem, we're not going to talk about heroin today, but this has been a big problem, not even in just Wisconsin, but across the country, heroin. If you have an overdose of heroin, you have to shut down that overdose because it'll eventually basically suffocate you. So they give them that stuff, and it actually worked. And so again, this is one of those where we're like, we didn't expect that to happen because it doesn't act the same way. So again, these are more questions that we have as experts. We didn't know that something like that could work. Same thing, overdose in Dane County. This is now May of 2012, so this is a little bit older. Now this is a 16-year-old kid. I can't say where, but it's within this vicinity. 2 hits. So 2 hits, that's pretty small. It's a small dose when we talk about marijuana, synthetic or otherwise. And he has a horrible reaction too. His mom wakes up, he's freaking out, he's lethargic, he thinks he's gonna die. She calls 911, of course. They come and they try to help him. Again, we do the Narcan, but it doesn't really work on him this time, but it wasn't clear how much he was given. So anybody know, raise your hand. Blood pressure, what's normal for blood pressure?
120
What was it? Yeah, 120/80. So is his blood pressure 92/48? That's really low. That's not normal. So it really drops his blood pressure. And again, not something we expect. So as I said, as the experts, we don't even really know. So just, you don't know either. So be really careful. One of the big things that the deputy was talking about when he arrived on scene was that the pupils were not reacting. So tell me what happens when you shine a light into a pupil. Yeah, contracts. Very good. So nothing was happening. It's like the lights are on in there, and you're knocking on the door, but it's like no one's home to answer the door. So he was obviously mentally there, but he couldn't react. His pupils weren't even reacting, which tells you that the brain is compromised. We actually twice now have done a study where we've dosed people with synthetic cannabinoids or spice or K2 to see what would happen. When we look at both of those, we have a really good idea now of if you've never used marijuana synthetic or the real stuff, you haven't basically primed your body to be able to accept it, and the reactions we see are horrible. They're overdose, they're really bad. So this is especially for you, because a lot of you probably haven't tried anything, hopefully at this point. Because your little bodies aren't ready, because your brain isn't ready, you have a higher risk of being in one of these overdose categories. So you have to be really careful. And just because Jordan tries it and then I do doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have the same reaction. So everybody's different, and we cannot predict what's going to happen with these drugs at all. So that was kind of the take-home message. So I grabbed a couple of cases that I've worked. Part of my job is working with law enforcement, and we work cases as far as operating while intoxicated. So does anybody know what that means? Yes, exactly. You almost said it verbatim. So it's basically operating anything, a boat, an ATV, a snowmobile, on a roadway, or something, well, not a bicycle. Let's not try that. While you're under the influence of something, which can be alcohol, it can be drugs, it can be an inhalant, which we're going to talk about. So we do a lot of those cases. And this is one of those cases where it was in Dunn County, which is kind of western Wisconsin. So SP stands for State Patrol. So there's a semi, and he has been at a rest stop. He pulls onto the interstate. There's 2 lanes on the interstate. Does anybody know what the speed limit is on the interstate? 65. Yes, 65. So does anybody raise your hand? What time is 2314 in non-military? What time is that?
11:14 p.m.
I got all kinds of stuff. So it's almost midnight. So it's dark out, right? It's 11:14 p.m. So he is in the right lane of the interstate, and he stopped. He's driving a semi, and he stopped. And so no lights on, just stopped. So you can imagine up in northern Wisconsin, it's pretty dark up there. Many people were able to kind of see him and swerve around him and call him in, but before they could get there, the state patrol could get there to stop him, a car rear-ended him, and a bunch of people were killed in a family. So they're going to charge him with homicide by negligent use. And they call this cop to come, which is called a drug recognition expert. And these are cops that are specially trained to look at your eyes, your pulse, your blood pressure to determine, is this an injury, is it medical, is it drug related? So that cop shows up, and immediately he can tell that his pulse is just beating in his neck. So it's like this really fast pulse. Does anybody know what raise your hand, The normal range for pulse, so we know.
60 to 100.
Yeah, 60 to 100. So I was going to, and then I rethought. So he's got 150 for pulse. So that's way above what normal is supposed to be, right? He's totally out of it. Thought he was driving. Didn't have any idea that he was stopped. So this gives you an idea of the power of this drug. He smoked spice at the rest stop, and then thought he was going on his way. And then they ended up killing somebody. Same thing out of Wauwatosa, which is near Milwaukee. We've got a user, a regular user of synthetics. He had just met his girlfriend at a head shop, bought the same brand that they bought the day before, the few days before. It was Pink Kush. Gets in his car, drives to Kmart, doesn't remember anything after that. But what happened was he pulled into the parking lot. His SUV, or his vehicle was nose to nose with an SUV. And it's like he just kept driving right to that SUV. The rear tires on his car were spinning, went all the way down to the rims. The sparks were flying. Law enforcement gets there, they get to the vehicle, and he's got vomit all down the front of him. So what do you think has happened to him?
Having seizures.
Yeah, yes, seizures. So he had a seizure. This is the same product that he always uses. This is an adult, 25-year-old male. Same product that he always buys. But he had a seizure off of it. So what this is telling us is, even though the product was the same, either the drug that was in there, and there's like over 400 different synthetic cannabinoid drug compounds, they changed it, whoever makes them changed it, or they increased how much is in there. So that's why, there is no like FDA looking over the shoulder of these drug manufacturer guys saying, that's too much, that's not enough. There's no regulation. We don't know what's in these at all. So this is a great example of an adult that's a normal user that could not handle it, had a seizure. No history of seizures before. So again, that's just a good example of the power of this drug. According to the survey, it sounded like bath salts. Y'all haven't really heard about them. Does anybody know about bath salts?
Yeah.
We've had some, the media's helped us out here. They've had some negative attention. I'm not going to really talk too much about them, but just know that where synthetic, the spice in the K2 is bad, this stuff is 100 times worse. Mostly when we come across people that are under the influence of these drugs, they're hallucinating, they're running down the street, and they tase them. So you don't want to put yourself in that situation. One other thing I just want to touch on is inhalants. Why? Oh, yeah, why? Exactly. We see a lot of them. We see a lot of these cases of inhalants, especially in young kids. Summer of 2012, we had two girls just outside of Madison. Maybe you remember, they were swimming with a bunch of other friends right after school was out. And one or two of them was a good swimmer. When we got their tox, what we found was the stuff in the dust off can. So they were swimming while they were huffing dust off, and it's crazy potent, it's really bad, it completely makes you black out, and they drown. So again, I know that we have these cases all over Madison. Just please be smart about it. Please, please. I know you may think it's legal, and I know you may think it's safe, but it's not. Most of our cases in drivers that are using dichloroethane are crashes because they're huffing while they drive, and then they pass out. Has anybody ever heard of any other kind of huffing? Yeah, spray paint. We have people huffing spray paint. What else? Glue. I don't know who said that. So
Sharpies.
What? Sharpies. Yeah.
Sharpies.
Sharpies. What else?
Nail polish remover.
Nail polish remover. What else?
Nail polish.
Yeah.
Whippets. Have you ever heard of whippets? That's nitrous. That's the whipping cream. I don't know who said a brain or an eyeball. I'll give you both. So, again, easy to get, but be incredibly careful. This stuff is dangerous and it can kill you, especially because you're an adolescent.
I just have a question. You know, like helium from balloons, is that bad for your brain?
So the question was helium from balloons. Is that bad for your brain? Who hasn't done that? know, right? Yes, it is in large quantities in large doses. So if you're just, you do it once and you check it out and it's funny and you're done, that's fine. But has anybody ever done it? It hurts your head and you feel lightheaded. That's because your brain isn't getting oxygen. So you have to remember that and be really careful with your inhalants. Does anybody know what this is?
Cody.
Yeah,
I just said that. Hey, you okay?
so what do we call it? What's the slang for this? Dirty spray. What else? Drain. So this one is particularly scary because, does anybody know what's in that cough syrup?
Codeine.
Codeine. What is that? Does anybody know? Raise your hand on. Does anybody know what codeine is? Like what kind of drug? Yep, it's in cough syrup. Oops, sorry, that was my bad. So, codeine, they use it to keep your cough down, but there's other things you can use for it.
What's a pain reliever and a fever?
Yes, a pain reliever. Oh, Lord help me. Oh, you're so close. It's a pain reliever. But the thing you need to understand about codeine, does anybody know what heroin is? Heroin? So we talked about it, you've heard about it. This is the same kind of drug as heroin. So we're seeing heroin overdose and deaths all over the place. We're going to see the same thing with this drug. So I'm not saying you've tried it, I'm not saying that you've been asked to try it, but I'm just telling you, if you're anywhere and somebody tells you to try it, we've seen fatal overdose deaths in adolescents at really low concentrations of this cough syrup because you cannot handle it. You guys are not ready for it. And even if you were, you should still not be doing it because, think about heroin. Would you do heroin? No, hopefully. But it's the same, it's in that same category, it's the same kind of drug. We're really risking it. Does anybody know any other cough or cold that might be abused? Promethazine, yep, it's in there. Anything else? We don't see so much Sudafed, but has anybody ever heard of DXM?
Yeah.
Corsine, cough and cold? Yeah. So with that one, really bad side effects, but not only initially are you having a bad reaction, but long term. Does anybody know what else is in a lot of these cough medications? And you rattle off some of the other stuff that's in there? Acetaminophen, doxylamine, like there's all these other drugs that are in there. And the one thing to know about acetaminophen, while it's seen, does anybody know what acetaminophen is also called? Nope, that's no.
I'll take it.
Acetaminophen is horrible on your liver and causes overdoses more than you know. So while you might think that's a safe over the counter, you have to be really careful about how much you take it. So when you're taking these drugs in these huge amounts, you're running the risk of killing your liver. So DXM is another one of those that you have to be really careful with. Anybody know, have you heard of ecstasy?
Yeah.
Okay. So ecstasy is a hallucinogen, and we see it a lot at parties. It's usually pressed, it's a powder that's pressed into a pill. And the number of overdose reactions in people of your age group has doubled. Because not only is that an issue now, but if you take ecstasy now, do you know what happens to you later? What's going to end up happening later in life? Yeah, your brain is going to be damaged. Do you have a Bible or what do you do? I'll give you a 2 hours. People that use ecstasy at your age end up on antidepressants or clinically depressed later in life because you cannot handle, again, your connections aren't made and you're messing up with those connections, even just a few uses, and you can end up depressed later in life. These are some pictures, and actually there's, yeah, right? So this is from 2001 to 2008, so a year apart. This one, January to August. So that's the power of that drug. So the question was, why do they get weird face things and stuff? Yep, so the answer was they think, or did you want to know? They get out of brains. So they think there's things crawling all over them, and then that's why they pick. But it's actually a real phenomenon, and we get it not only with ecstasy, but we get it with methamphetamine too. It's like you can feel the nerve endings, and they're irritating until you pick at them. And then the weight loss and lack of hygiene and all that other stuff. All right, so really quick, for the last 5 minutes, I just want to touch on, what is this? Okay, marijuana or weed. So everybody thinks it's going to be legal, I'm sure, at some point, right? And really, what's disappointing in all of this is, have you ever known anybody that's undergone chemotherapy? They get incredibly sick, right? They can't keep food in, they're in pain. And this is a really great drug for that. But they can't get to it because all of the abusers are basically ruining it for them. What we found though, and especially in kids your age, chronic use at your age leads to kidney failure, and it's the same thing, like you're messing up with that wiring, so later on in life, those cognitive issues, like you can't really remember stuff, short-term, long-term. So again, I'm sure you're thinking, who cares, or, my friends use it all the time, and nothing happens. That's right, because that's today. What you gotta remember is, you're gonna wanna go to college, you're gonna wanna do stuff later in life, and this is gonna impede that or impact that. So, I really appreciate that you gave me your time. I have more erasers up here if anybody wants to come and get some. And I have some candy too. If you have questions, hang on. If you have questions and it's something like you don't want to come to me today and ask and you want it to be somewhat anonymous, please feel free to email me. I always encourage high school kids to email me because a lot of times you don't want to come and ask me right now, and that is fine. I totally understand that. So please, my door is completely open. You can Google me and find me that way too if you don't want to scrabble down my email address right now. So please do not hesitate. If you have a question, you have a question.
People are asking questions.
So the question was, why do we still have K2? Why is it still legal and we know that it's really bad? The answer to that is, unfortunately, in Wisconsin, when I helped write the first law, and I knew back then that it was going to be short-sighted. Because unfortunately, as soon as we figure out how to make something illegal, they change it, and then it circumvents our law. So we're trying everything we can to try to, stop it and quell it, but it's like they keep circumventing the law. We just rewrote the current law that we have in Wisconsin that will basically make every single synthetic drug out there illegal, and it's working its way through, but Lord help me, the government takes forever. So I don't know when it's ever going to pass, but it's there right now. As of November 5th, they read it through the Assembly. Any other questions?